brought to that list.
George Ruby.
Josephine Marsh. So we did see and I also wanted to let you know that in just speaking with Dr. Alvermann, she said that she's heard some wonderful things about the Literacy Center from Vicki Gillis, and spoke very highly of it. But she said it didn't really come to the realization of how good it was until she was able to visit the center, the university, and all that it has to offer. And one of the things she's really noticed is the collaboration between the doctoral students and the faculty. Before anything else, I also want to note that we have placed some note cards around the table, so if you don't have one, go ahead and grab one. We're going to do questions after the presentation, so if you have questions, go ahead and write them down. And after the presentations, I'll come and collect them from you, and Dr. Alvermann will answer those questions in that order. Without further ado, Dr. Alvermann.
We just checked the time. I have planned about a 35 to 40 minute presentation, is that right? And then questions and answers, hopefully answers after that. But I love questions that can't be answered, so I ask away, and I'll just say, I don't know. When you find out, would you let me know? Okay? All right, well, this morning I am, again, I'm staying true to my title, because this has become very much a part of me in the last 6, 7, 8 months. And you'll understand why when I get into my talk this morning. But I do want to start out with just something a little bit as an opener, because this has been an exciting week and a half for me, and you can imagine the weather had something to do with that. So I'm sitting back in Athens, Georgia, and it wasn't that warm, but it was sunny, and there was no weather showing to be coming through. And we were driving rather than my flying, and everything's coming together while everything is falling apart. Seemed to be the mode that I was in when I was, before I actually emailed. I call Vicki Victoria. Yeah. So I'll probably slip and say that on more than one occasion. So I actually took this quote from a book that Rebecca put out a long time ago, but she keeps being asked to put different editions out. And it's a wonderful book in terms of just finding quotes to sort of fit your mood for a day. And it's called Hope in the Dark, Untold Histories, Wild Possibilities. And a small book, very tiny, and just wonderful there's a story behind each of the quotes, but you can make that quote go for anything that you want it to stand for. Many of my days are like that anyway. It's not just about coming out of it. So I always feel like that. It's always exciting. Everything is coming together while everything is falling apart, right? But I have rose-colored glasses on. I'm very much of an optimist. People tell me too much of an optimist, and therefore I see the world through rose-colored glasses anyway. I continue to see it that way today, but for a little history, I don't think Victoria knew I took this picture. You sent it out on Facebook.
I sent it out.
So I copped it, but gave her credit, and said, heading out from Athens, Georgia to Laramie. I realize this white is not showing up on the purple as well. Maybe not a good choice, but
no, it's hard.
Can you see it? Okay.
Yeah, we can see it.
All right. On 325, and Dr. Gillis gives the thumbs up, because she tells me that it's snowing one day, and a couple of days later it will be sunny out because it melts very quickly. And I've learned to believe what she says. And so without any further ado, we packed the car, the dog, and everything else, and out we came. And here on Easter Sunday was exactly what she said would happen. We rolled into Wyoming on I-80 going west, and 2.5 days, driving days later, we were met with a beautiful sunny day that lasted through Monday.
Yeah.
So now I'm thinking the pattern is going to be the same, and that we're going to roll out tomorrow morning. Mm-hmm. It could be. The sun seems to be, something's awfully bright in this room, right? Yeah. So I'm shortening the pattern a little bit, but if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. And I feel safe and secure in Laramie. in as much as it looks like, I know you guys are prepared for snow. I came from upstate New York, and so Buffalo, Syracuse area, Syracuse has the least number of sunny days every year. It has that record or whatever. It never bothered me that it was cloudy and that was just a day. I moved to Houston, Texas, and my eyes are blinded by the sun or whatever. So I adapt fairly easily, and I'm very happy to be here. And Katie did a wonderful job of saying what has impressed me so far and how extremely happy I am for all of you to be here. So now back to the title and into my talk today. Okay, EdTPA, I knew a lot about it because I would be on committees and we'd be talking about it, but it never affected me as a professor until fall of 2015. And at that point, I was called in to teach an undergraduate course that was supposed to be taught by a graduate student who was called off to do something different. And since I do teach the course anyway, it's a reading methods course. And so it wasn't anything that I had to prepare for or anything, and I teach it fairly regularly, like maybe regularly would be about every 5 years, and then the rest of the time is for master's students and doctoral students. But I was ready to go. In fact, I was excited about it, and I was given the EdTP manuals prior to, by the middle grades group, which is separate from language and literacy education, on a different floor and everything else, one of the different groups in the college, different departments in the college. So I walked into the classroom the first time, and I was a little nervous because this was a tryout time. I think Wyoming's been into EdTPA for a longer time than we have been. This is our first year right now, 15, 16, to have it really count. And I was going to be working with a group of 21 pre-service teachers who were supposed to be all English language arts divided apart from me. Because see, I have a history background, okay? I am not an English person, but I love literacy and I go across the content areas. So they all, in my department, want me to teach science, mathematics, and social studies or history, whatever. And I'm more than happy to do that. And my doctoral advisee and first year experience at UGA as a doctoral student, she is the other way, all English. So we had decided ahead of time she would take all the English, and that would be great, 20 or 21 of them, and I'd take all the others that were left over. I walked into the class and I started to show, I'd spent the summer, even though I didn't change my syllabus that much, because quite frankly, this is a course that everybody has to take and it doesn't change very much, but I had spruced it up a little bit and had added all the science and literature, YA, nonfiction, whatever, and I started with it, and somebody said in a nice, polite way, am I in the right class? And I went, I don't know, why? They said, well, I thought we were doing all English. I went, oh, really? Well, I'll tell you something. Teachers have, this is a pre-service, they've just come out of arts and sciences, they've had no other courses, never a methods course. And so I'm thinking, teach to the moment and say, great, this is a great teachable moment. I will show you how flexible I can become, right? Because I didn't quite know what else to say or do. And especially, I thought that, I was thinking my advisee, who was probably facing a similar situation, but everybody's saying, what, are we going to do English again? I thought we were going to have my content area represented. So, So when I got up to talk about what we were going to do and put on my slides, etc., one of the students had asked a question about why I was changing things up about the standards, Common Core standards. And I said, well, actually, we have to do something a little differently this year because the standards are being revised again. Georgia performance standards have been revised 3 years in a row to align. And so therefore, I had made my outlines, etc., to meet the new ones. However, I had left some old verbiage in one of the old ones. And so I said, again, improvising. This is the first day, toward the beginning of the semester. I wouldn't say it's the very first day, but I'm beginning to see that I'm making the same mistakes over and over and over again. It looks like I'm not prepared, right? But I really am prepared, except that I'm teaching on new territory. I don't know these standards. I'm not a classroom teacher. They've never been a classroom teacher yet, or whatever. And so I'm really not winging it, but I'm really beginning to feel very anxious about if I know anything about anything to teach these students. So when I say, all right, no, we're not going to use this part of the overhead slide, just ignore that, that's old verbiage or whatever. And so then I felt the need to say again to them something like, but you will know that this is a good hint that Common Core is going to figure into a lot of the things we're going to be doing this semester. And one person raised his hand and said, is it going to be on the test? And so my immediate reaction was, inside me anyway, thinking, oh no, this is going to be a real long semester. But then I got to thinking, and I had to think quickly because it's right on the spot. I said, actually, no. If you have read your syllabus, etc., you'll see how we're going to organize the tests, and there are going to be a lot of tests like that, etc. And in the professional schools that you're coming to, you'll be doing a lot of group work and projects and things like that. And so the person was satisfied, and I felt fairly satisfied that I had answered that question. As a result of that, I thought later on it though, this is probably the first group of students who had gone all the way from first grade up to high school under No Child Left Behind and all the many tests that they have. So for them to ask, is it on the test, is a very reasonable thing to wonder about. And for me to feel old-fashioned, like, oh, don't come up with that again. I've been teaching too many years to hear somebody say the first day, or one for the first day, is it going to be on the test or something like that? So I began to get in what I felt like was in a groove with them. And then I need to correct this slide a little bit because I got out of whack here. Still think I might be out of whack, but we'll go with what we have here. So I started to thinking rather more about who my literacy identity is for me as a teacher. And part of that was actually helped along by the fact that I had been asked to write a chapter for a Springer Handbook of Research. They have many out there. And my chapter had been literacies and identities. So I couldn't have found a better match between my own scholarly interests and what was going on in my classroom. But as I was doing this, I was finding that I was feeling very comfortable about this level of identity work because I recognize this. And although these are my words, it is becoming new information for me at the time because I was saying, I'm thinking of literacy as a social practice. I'm thinking of the students as being able to negotiate their identities. I feel comfortable about this. I can negotiate my own identity, etc. So as I'm writing and also teaching, I'm feeling like things are coming together. But probably, as that subtitle said, everything was really falling apart. I just didn't know it yet. You can read this about the negotiation process and ways of being. So I'm really feeling good because everything is matching up for me in terms of my own knowledge of who I am and what I'm going to do with this class. I found out during the time of, say, like second or third week that I didn't have just pre-service teachers in with me. I had MAT students who had degrees in like psychology or another area, but were coming back to get their teacher certification. And then I had a few people in there who were from other departments who had just been told to take the class from me. So I'm thinking, okay, something is really this is going to be an interesting semester, and I met them 2 times a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays from 11 to 12:30. They were taking other courses at the time, and those courses were 3 other methods courses, 2 of which were math, tells me that maybe they had not done so well in math over in the arts and sciences, and so they were in another area. And they also had an observation time out in the schools, 2.5 days per week. So they were mighty busy on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday till noon. They were out in the schools observing. But that was good because they had some practical things to go along, so I was very happy about that. but they were quite stressed about that whole time period and when they could actually get their work done, et cetera. So they were very conscientious, but also beginning to seem to me to push back against what I was going to be teaching that semester. And this was not something I would work with pre-service teachers, okay? I didn't talk to them about identities. This is, you have to remember that I'm telling you is that the story all fit together nicely. But my half of me was thinking this, but I was really talking just content literacy and going through the usual procedures and activities and projects that we would do in class. And it became clear that being able to negotiate my role as someone who is seen as an expert in the field on adolescent literacy was more difficult than I had ever imagined it would be, because the students were fairly, I wouldn't say apathetic overall, but in terms of being told that they're going to have a video made of their teaching and all the things at EdTPA, and they were being told in other classes, I didn't think that they would fight me on the idea of teaching close reading. Okay? I know they wouldn't. I don't think they would have in the sciences, maybe in math, whatever, because they wouldn't have heard that word as a bad word ahead of time, and so wouldn't have been opposed to it. I knew enough about close reading to know that you don't teach it every day, so I had told them that. It's not something that you, even though I demonstrate it for you and then you're going to in your small groups work and do this, it's not something that you will actually have to do every day of your life as a teacher, because this would be quite overwhelming. And I cited Catherine Snow for saying that, etc. It's just something you need to do when the opportunity arises and you see the kids are not reading closely. What that, by the way, in our field, as many of you know, means many different things. But I didn't go into that with them because, again, I don't think that they were unable to handle those complexities. I just felt that I needed to go through quickly because my identity is now tied up very much with this group of 21 people. And for some mornings, I really wished that I hadn't taken on that task. Because I usually am successful in teaching, whether it's an undergraduate or whatever, but I was really struggling on this particular semester. But I said nothing to anybody, except my advisee, who I felt like was teaching, remember, the people that I thought I was having, and she was saying the same thing. She said, let's just not tell anybody anything, and we'll just make it through. And she's had a lot of classroom teaching experience, right? So we had this little pact that we would help each other. And she had difficulty with some students that I didn't have, and vice versa. And so we kibitzed it a lot, and I don't usually do that. You know, it's like I handle it in my own way. But this was an instance in which I needed at least one shoulder to lean on, and although we didn't complain to each other, she actually could get to some students better than I could, and vice versa. So that's a little bit of the background in terms of what we were trying to do is to negotiate our way through these different identities, these literacy identities. She did not know at the time, I didn't even think to tell her that I was writing this chapter. Okay, I figured, you know, you have enough trouble with yourself down and keep it, don't have to bring her into that. This is her first year. She's teaching 2 of our methods courses. And so I'm thinking, so what you're seeing today is like me, but you're not seeing her, but she figures into the picture in a way that you'll understand in a few minutes. So I was writing along in the chapter, and the research does show that we, nowadays, in a sociocultural model of reading, which is very much a social practice, not that the cognitive part is ever to be forgotten in my mind, but quite frankly, in the courses they take at UGA, some of the things that I would have liked them to know about cognitive science and the things that really inform their backgrounds and their schools, et cetera, is not taught anymore. So I have to sort of push that in, okay? Because we are really separated from the psychology folks now, so they don't take courses from some of the professors they did. Anyway, so what I'm finding, though, as I am rewriting my own literacy identity, is I have to write this chapter that's due at the end of December, that I'm thinking I really need to pay attention to what the researchers are saying, who I'm synthesizing for this research handbook chapter, because this will be very important for me, not to just spread out to some unknown audience, but for me to learn about for myself. So I became very much embedded in the literature that I was writing about, which was really quite familiar to me. I mean, I was doing this as a handbook, and so they knew I knew enough about it to write about it. So I wasn't coming across anything really exciting, anything new rather, but I have to remember what's new, not new to me, it would be new to other people. So I went the route of looking at, you'll see some of the other side, some of G's work and what G says about identity, etc. But I also had to reflect back on how I was identifying identity at that time, before I got into something which is going to be the ending of this talk, okay? And so I'm not saying that where I ended was any better than where I began, but I will say it was a journey that took a semester's worth of work, and being able to actually put my pedagogy up against what I was writing about, that was a new experience for me as a researcher. We talk about integrating pedagogy and research, but sometimes I get my hat on only as a writer, sometimes I get my hat on only as a teacher. Rarely am I doing both for myself at the same time. So the class is going along fairly, not getting any worse at this point, okay? Not getting to the point where I have actually had to go to Rachel and say, how about this student? Or she's come to me and said, how about this student? It appeared to me that I was having more difficulty than Rachel. She was coming straight out of middle grades classroom. She had all the cachet, you know, when you're teaching out in the field, and now you can tell these little anecdotes and stories. So I was happy for her because she was seeming to be very relevant in their lives. And she also was not much, as an English teacher, into close reading. So she had decided not to teach close reading as a demo model, right? She chose another thing that they could be videotaped on, SMART, because they liked it. It was all about writing, right? And they loved it, and it was creative and everything else. So these students also know each other very well. They're in a cohort. So I can imagine what they were saying about, I wish I was thinking or whatever. I don't know that for sure, and Rachel would be too polite to say to me if that had been the case that she had been asked to take my additional 21 on. It's a little funny now, but it's still very real and very raw, because I can remember those days of being uncertain about what I was doing, and was I going to be able to encourage them to be teachers of literacy. And it dawned on me one day as we were talking that I probably was quite irrelevant, because as one young woman said in the class, she didn't say that, she just raised her hand and she said, Dr. Alvermann, how many, and she didn't wait to be, but I don't ask that they be called on anyway, but she felt the need to interrupt at a certain point. How long will it be before we can get back in the day, and teach like we did back in the day? And I went, back in the day. Now that's in the 60s for me. Talk about identity crises, but I didn't show it or anything. I remember thinking, and so I said, well, when would that be? And she said, 2008. And again, I'm being the drama queen here. I was really playing it straight. And because it is back, I mean, it's all relative, and it is back in the day. And what she was referring to was the fact that they got to read novels in school and didn't have to even talk about or think about close reading. And by the way, I wasn't teaching close reading every day, but it had made such a big impression on them, and a negative impression, even though I had videos built in, and they practiced it themselves, and I gave them feedback on it. It was going fairly well. I could tell by the looks on their faces and their body movements that I wasn't hitting where I should be hitting. So I asked her if she would like to, the person that asked me that question, I said, that is a wonderful idea. Let's do a classroom tiki-taki. I don't know if you've ever used that as a timeline. It's a real neat teaching tool, and someone had given it, you get one free tiki-taki, and you can give out one free to every member of your class. It's called TIKI, TOKI, tiki-taki. And it's just a way of showing timelines when things happen, quite frankly, but it goes 3D, and it's really quite fun because it's interactive. The students have to name the historical period they're in, etc. So I gave them a shortened version of Nyla Manton Smith's History of Reading instruction, thinking, and again, that was like out of the 1930s keyboard. So I really know that I had to bridge for them, but I did. They had a wonderful time with this project, because what I discovered was, out of all the little bits and pieces that I had them exploring, was that it wasn't until after the Second World War that people actually began to teach content, or any kind of literacy, reading, and the veterans were coming back and going back to school. If they hadn't read well in the service, they could get free schooling and all that. They just had never thought of that. So that was what they took from that, was the class tiki-talkie. And then later they liked it so much it became part of their final project, that they could make a tiki-talkie on whatever they wanted to do. But so that was kind of a turning point in the semester, in the sense that I thought, okay, I'm actually making sense of them. They're really seeing, and they're grasping another outside. They're bringing in history, and these are all English language arts people. I'm really feeling good about myself as an identity speaking. And I'm thinking we're really rolling along here. And then I made the mistake of getting confident rather. And I began, because of the research I was still collecting on my own, was telling me that one way that you negotiate an identity is to take an opening, when you see an opening, and just go in that direction and build on it. So I thought, well, they were interested in the history of reading for a short period. These didn't take more, say, than a class. The project didn't take more than about a week and a half, so we did it as a whole group. Their own projects, obviously, took a longer time. So I thought I had made a breakthrough. It would be time to bring in something current. So I brought in some news that in October, mid-October, that the people in the United States were saying that there were too many tests being given to students, and therefore there was going to be a change in that. And since they had been worried about tests, or I thought they had been worried about tests, they all seemed really, I thought, excited. This would be the time when they would go, yay, or something like that. Instead, I get this look of, at best, oh, and they were checking their cell phones. I do not have the policy to turn everything off. I just don't. But I do ask them that if they're a bother, if they're distracting them, I will come along and just tap them on the shoulder, and that means put the device away. So that was working well, classroom management. They didn't even take their cells out to check what the news was that morning. It was just, they looked at me like bored out of their bored. So I explained to them, I said, no, you've taken a lot of tests, right? And they looked at me like that was just, I'm beginning to get this idea that what is not in my identity to life, in they're identifying as this is the way you do school. So they're not excited, but it didn't come easily to me. This is in reflection, along with writing the chapter. So I said to them, is the result of this action plan, it wasn't the actual time yet, where you would pass the ESSA. So I said, in reaction to this, why don't you just keep your eyes open and ears open, because I think you're going to find something really exciting happening by the end of the semester before we close down class, thinking, build anticipation, history. Again, it would have been great with the history students, and I had them in my class. They took it like, that was not one of my better days, but it was not a bad day for them either. Okay? So we go on through the semester, and my idea, what I'm realizing about identity and how you work with all of the parts that are going on is, especially knowing that Jinji had warned us about not trying to change someone else's identity. That can be very demeaning. In other words, it not only says, you and I don't agree, Anne, but I think that you need to come over. I'm the teacher, you need to come over to my show. So, as a result of my reading and thinking about what I know as a researcher, I was really playing this quite well, I thought, and fairly, I had my bad days and my up days, some things took, some things didn't, but it was kind of going along with who my identity was. Although the chapter is not about me, it's all about research, but I was using that research as I was going along to make sense of it, as I said several times already, for myself. So, what I have I've done is I've taken this background of information, which is pretty much what I expect most of you believe in here, that literacy is a social practice, reading is a social practice, writing is a social practice. We divide the two at UGA yet. I don't think it's a good idea, but it's in the curriculum. So one person teaches reading, the other person teaches writing. And they certainly get, for me, they get a lot of the reading strategies and all of that sort of thing. I don't build the identity work into it. I will if I teach this course again. Definitely build it in because I could see that how they were identifying and knew that as English language arts students, they would not identify exactly with the way that I was now trying to organize this course. And Don Liu's part comes in the fact that, I don't know if you've ever heard him talk or have heard the word deixis, D-E-I-X-I-S, deixis. It's a word that means the idea is that time changes, but what was yesterday becomes today in a 24-hour time period, okay? That's kind of a neat idea. I don't think anybody else in literacy education has written about deixis like Don has, and he has actually done his whole research around that type of idea that everything's always new in technology and literacy because every day society is changing, technology is changing, it's getting faster and faster and faster. So that was also being helpful to me as I'm realizing don't panic over the fact that you felt very insecure when you realized you had a different group of people and you also had people who thought back in the day was 2008, etc. And so we were rolling along and feeling fairly good about it. Still feeling, and I didn't bring in any more news items, there wasn't really anything more news because I knew something else about testing would fall flat, and so we just let that ride. But then there were some identity clashes in terms of what I learned, and I've hinted at this as I went along. The week one of the semester that I talked about, and the reason I'm going backwards now is I want to build you up for where I landed, or where I am now, okay? So there was that. There was the recognition that pre-service teachers actually don't know how to read reform, okay? And that went back to a study I had written and published back in 2006 when NCLB was at its height. And I had people in the same class, but high school people, because you can teach it for high school or middle grades. And 3 of the 17 people in my class that year opted not to take a test. It wasn't EdTPA, obviously, but they opted out of education because they did not want to become teachers. They felt that this is not what they thought teachers did or how they went to school or whatever. And that shook me up a bit. Over 3 out of 17 is a lot to lose. I managed to keep 2 of them in by explaining that at least get your education degree. You might not get credentialed, but at least you'll have a degree. Don't drop out. The other person dropped out of education completely and went a different route. Okay. So every Student Succeeds Act now comes in at 2015 when the president signs it into law, and it's very interesting that supposedly all the over-testing, et cetera, that we've been doing is now up to the states, and the states can decide how many tests you get. Georgia came out with something a few days ago that said they were dropping, according to ESSA, but they were dropping every Student Succeeds Act, they would drop 4 of the studies that were, I forget, they gave 4 of the tests, they gave 13 a year, they would drop 4, but they were going to add 2. Right, I'm not a mathematician, but this is no real game, guys. And the teachers, of course, who are practicing teachers, know that it's probably not going to be any better with the states deciding than it was with the feds. They've already said that they now go to meetings just as much as they did before, only now it's changing the standards again to the Common Core to match up with what they want to do with ESSA. And this is going to all be done and everybody was going to be happy by August 2016. We start very early in Georgia. That's when our fall semester starts. So, I'm beginning to see another pattern. Well, this hit me before in 2006. I had never remembered it. I wrote that article and forgot about it. Because it was being published in Pedagogies, which is an international journal, read mostly by people in other countries other than the US, and it just kind of slipped my mind, or my attention. this is the midway point, I tell you, where I say something's going to change, guys. It's going to be actually a time when we can do away with some of the things we don't like. They were linking teachers' pay in Georgia in some counties with how much their kids achieved. And that did go out with us, we think. Although some school districts are saying they're still not going to do that. They're going to take a third of the principal's evaluation of the teacher and count that based on what their kids did on a test. So all of these acts and these reform movements that come about, I really do think I need to, in another semester, get them somehow interested so they can become smarter about these things and not just pass it off. Because this was really their motto. Keep calm. I mean, they didn't make this up, but I found this. Keep calm, get over it already. Donna, they want to call me Dr. So I'm beginning to think I'm getting calm and I'm getting over it, kind of. But I'm still having this identity because you don't spend most of your time thinking you know how to teach this course and get good evaluations to come up against a group that is absolutely telling you something different about themselves, maybe not even about me, but I'm internalizing it, taking it personally. So there's a great article out, if you haven't seen this, you just don't cross them, adolescent interactions with text across discourses. It's written by a person who's not in the literacy field, I just happened upon it, Anita Charles from Bates College, very good college in Maine. And she is actually looking more at the digital than I was at this point. I was doing some digital stuff, obviously, in my class, but I was also doing a lot of face-to-face, and so there was less need for me to get into the digital like I usually do if I'm teaching, of course, digital in the title. But I like this work because what she did is she listened to the students in her class, and she was actually having an experience prior to when she wrote this that was very similar to mine. She was realizing that she had a different animal out there that was sitting in front of her than maybe it had been the case in previous years. And so this recognition of teacher identity, although she doesn't go into identity like I'm framing this talk, it was about what she had to sort of absorb or at least think second thoughts on. And this title, No, Just Don't Cross Them. This really is in relation to the fact that she kept saying, you know, when you're doing texting, whatever, and you maybe use some shortened or spellings or whatever, do you think that as an English teacher or whatever is going to be appropriate? And they say to her things like, well, you don't ever cross them anyway. I know how to keep my digital communication genres to myself. And so she tried again a different way and say, if you ever think, give a different example. And they would come back always with, you just don't cross them, teacher. You know? In other words, we've got our heads on straight. And what was happening with her was, she was actually doing some research on Neteracy, Neteracy. And Neteracy is the idea that you teach students that you use this device for that, or that device for this, or you speak this way in chat, or Snapchat? Yeah. Or you speak this other way or whatever in another device that you're using. And most of the students that I'm teaching now, who are between 25 and maybe 35, are actually using Instagram. They're not using language much at all. It's just a picture. And I'm not having a lot of luck. Although I love visuals, I can't express myself, and I always have to put something down at the bottom so somebody understands. And so my doctoral students are telling me that they're going to show me how I can do that, because they said, you love the visual, you love icons and all that, we'll help you do that. It's a little bit, along with hashtags and all that, which are very complicated. You can use them rhetorically. They can make an argument, and they're not just to group ideas together, but it's actually a rhetorical thing. People are doing dissertations on hashtags, and how and this is in English classes, and how you can get across rhetoric in rhetoric classes if you're doing something with a hashtag much better if you know some of the information. This is not my field, and I don't know that research that well, so it's not included in my chapter. So, how am I defining myself now? This may be, I think I'm about to set myself up to run into a classroom of people who are not middle grades, teachers, but who may say, what? Or whatever. So if you get to feeling really bored and thinking this is not relevant, would you smile occasionally? You know how you do for speakers when you have a plant in the audience or whatever? Because I'm not sure I'm sold on this either, but it came about as a result of reading for this chapter that I was writing, and I did not play with this idea in terms of what I was doing with my class. So I'm going to leave that class situation alone. December did come, but by the time the president had signed ESSA, they were out. They get out quite early in December because they start early. So I don't know if they know to this day how important that news was that I brought out in October. And I do see a few of them around the halls of Adderhole because they're now taking the next methods course up or whatever. But when they see me, the things they remember are far different than what I thought I had taught them. And the best way to get in is to get in an elevator with a group of them who are saying, we miss this or we miss that or whatever. And the ones that were the most difficult to handle, like the guy that, this was an extreme, who came in and would land on a table, like a group table, and would start lying on his back and looking like a golden retriever to me, putting hands up in the air, feet up in the air, and wiggling all around. This before class started, right? And I went by one day and I said, okay, we're about to start. I'll name him C. And we're about to start, you might want to get your seat, etc. And I had a fairly good relationship with him. He timed me to make sure I was never late, and I timed him to make sure he was never late on our cell phones. So we had this sort of good relationship going, but this was a little out of the ordinary. And so I said, you know, I didn't ask him even to explain. I think he explained himself. He just said, you know, when you're around middle grade students all the time, you just begin to feel like them and act like them and everything else. And I'm thinking, well, I hadn't actually ever thought of that. It's not performance-wise on the table, right? So he nicely went to his seat, etc., and sat down. That was an extreme case, I'll admit. But in this whole identity thing, I'm having to judge, like, do I stop having fun with him, like timing each other? Do we get here on class? Because I can do that with students, undergrads as well as, and I thought, no, I can't change that much. Well, I'm defining identity differently now, along non-representational theory lines. And this is the part that I can't expect you to really be interested in, because if you haven't delved into it right now, you won't even understand perhaps why I would be interested in it. So I'm going to make it short, but I'm bringing out the points that are out there in the research literature. I'm drawing a lot on Kevin Leander's work. I don't know if any of you know or have read him. He's working right now with a person, or was when I got the research from this journal, JLR 2013. He has an article in there with Gail Bolt, B-O-L-E-T, and she is bringing a little psychoanalytic theory into what was actually a very text-centric theory. And this is where I want to go. So I want to set you up in the sense that, again, I'm not saying that that you and I are wrong about where we're situating ourselves, where I wrote most of that chapter about, because I still feel very confident that lets you do a lot of negotiation on your own. Their main message is you can negotiate all you want, but if you keep it text-centric, you're going to lose with the kids. Okay? And it's built upon a case, I won't read, it's too long to read, but they start out, he's first author, but I know it's Gail's talking about a boy that she observes for one day who's not doing well in school, struggling with reading. His identity is he's not a reader, and so is his classmates and his teacher's identity out for him, and he doesn't push back. You know, that pushback subjectivity thing, like you can identify me as something, but I know who I am. And I was doing a little of that with my class. I know who I am. I still know what I'm doing here, maybe more on some days than on other days. But anyway, so he doesn't have that subjectivity, and his parents haven't perhaps not, they don't teach him about it, but it's something that parents can do to say when people are asking you questions that really frighten you. Like one of my other past advisees has a daughter in 5th grade who was asked the other day by a boy, are you a boy or a girl? I don't like your haircut. Okay? And he was identified, he didn't know. He wanted her to say, and she said, I'm a girl. And she said, and I don't usually ask if anybody likes my haircut. but she had parents who were teaching her that subjectivity of like a pushback, okay? So who knows where that will go, but that's the first time I can think of somebody coming up and say to me, how do you identify? Well, knowing what's in the news right now, it's not unusual that kids would begin to look around their own peers and ask, are you a girl or a boy? It doesn't matter, okay? But that's an aside. I want to get back to, she starts out, and I know this is Gail's part at the very beginning, she starts out talking about this person and she watches all day long as the person is going through being not a reader, okay? Feeling like not a reader. So he is getting out his swords to play a ninja type game or whatever, and he's, then his friend comes over in the afternoon and they get in an argument about something, and they go back to see what that ninja character can do, so they're reading. This is not new, people do this all the time, right? The difference is that they do it, but we as educators don't know about it and don't respond to it, other than theoretically, yes, we should take everybody's, the fact that they negotiate theirs, etc. But when they don't negotiate the same way that you're negotiating your identity, there's a clash. And that's what had happened to me, and this became very realistic to me. So non-representational theory is something that you can read about. It's not cutting, well, it is new, and it's causing a lot of difficulty for those of us in the field who are trying to figure out just exactly what is non-representational theory. This is the best I can do for you. And I use reading, a representational reading versus representational theory, but it's coming from non-representational theory. So if you are doing a representational reading, not a post-structural, this is all based on the post-structural Deleuze and Guattari and Derrida and Foucault and others that you may have been reading about, it's not mainstream, okay, among most education classes, at least not at Georgia, maybe here. But this is what you would find. Another label for representation is text-centered. And the multi-literacies people, and that's what Kevin is critiquing, he likes the multi-literacies people. He's not going to say that his stuff in Gail's is going to replace that. I love the way, if you knew Kevin, you would understand why he can do this. He just says, this is New Literacies, New London Group, Jim G, blah, 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 all these things we associate, and this is where I am now. And he says, it's two things that I'm going to lie side by side and let the reader more or less decide where they come down on what makes sense to them. Non-representational reading, another label for it is emergent, because it means it's not, there's no beginning and there's no ending. It's all middles, and that's what post-structuralism, anybody in here who's authority on post-structuralism is going to say it's a lot more than that, and it is. But I'm trying to shorten it for you to say, we're not looking at where a kid was and interest-wise, what they had done in the first grade and building on that, how they read this text and that led to that text. Anymore, we're really looking at the label of emergent. We don't care what came, I know this sounds harsh, we don't care what came before, what's going to happen in the future, because we can't predict it anyway. And so we only can deal with what's in the middle. Some people use in the center. Okay, I don't like center as much, because center means to me to focus on only that, whereas the middle is kind of, has room on the sides to be wishy-washy. And center seems too an abrupt word. Okay? So anyway, this is how here's what happens when you look at the way we've been doing what we call modern structuralist theory before post-structuralist theory, okay? This is what it looks like. We're always trying to interpret text, and text even broadly defined, like performance, like see on the table, wiggling around, etc. Text that you're reading, linguistic. Text that you're reading visually, my body movements or whatever. So oral, what you're taking in orally, but you're not taking in visually. So we're talking text very broadly, but Kevin and Gail are saying, this is not necessarily the way they think education research is going to go. Okay? They're not pushy people. They put this out, they're getting cited a lot, but they're not on some role to like take over the multi-literacies people, the New London Group, to displace anyone. I know that too much about, if you know Kevin and Gail, you know that that's not their goal, but they just see the world differently in terms of identity. They go more broadly than identity too, but if you're not interested in identity, you won't be interested in this particular article. do limit yourself to whatever unfolds in any identity construction activity. In other words, you're so focused on the middles that you don't take advantage of what came before. So this is not a cure-all by any means, this is a trade-off, okay? So from a post-structuralist perspective, again, drawing on Deleuze and Guattari, especially 1,000 Plateaus, great book to read. That's a fairly, they have a one before that, schizophrenia and something else, but that's a hard one. I didn't join the conversation that way. I jumped in with 1,000 Plateaus. Okay. And I don't know a lot about it. I'm not a methodologist, I'm not a theorist or whatever, but I know enough to write about it, think about it, and talk about it. So, this is one of the things that they are saying, and they use the word emergence. A lot of our literacy people commonly here at Vanderbilt University, and UWYO at Maryland, one of the Maryland campuses. No, Penn State. Okay, so what you believe in, if you think about identity as being an emergent thing, is that texts are participants in the world. They are not merely about the world. That means, and this is hard to get your head wrapped around, I understand that, but it's been in our field for at least since 2002. But we haven't grasped yet and taken it in as a field yet. But Deborah Brandt is a well-known researcher at Wisconsin, and Katie Clinton worked with Jim G as a doctoral student. She's now working with Jenkins and a lot of the stuff that he's doing out in San Diego, which is more digital oriented. These are very smart people, but their ideas haven't been taken up yet. And I'm only sharing them with you because it came into my world again. I haven't thought much about this article back in 2002 since I read it the first time. But now it's beginning to click. Hey, it goes with Leander's work. Leander and Bolt's work. So, if you can get your head wrapped around that texts have agency, it will help. It doesn't mean that they're going to get up. This isn't going to get up and walk around the table. This, however, is having an effect on me as a speaker. It is giving me some sort of legitimacy, right? I can claim that somebody got published and it was in this journal that all of you who belong to LRA have access to. So the text is an agent in this very instance right here, okay? And a lot of people don't go that way. That's fine. Their head is in the idea that things are more static and categorized, etc. So I'm not asking you to change your identities. Jim G says that can be very not only demeaning, but it can actually harm if somebody pushes this too much. So they say when identities are imposed and accepted, the limits can influence what we can say who we are, like the little boy playing all day long. It gets a better, when you read the article, the story is quite interesting and what happens. That kid's limited until, as long as he accepts what everybody else thinks about him as a reader in school, and whether ever he likes to read or not. He is reading, but reading doesn't count. We know that from other research. They say multimodal text, print, image, sound, they can be redesigned. This is the multi-literacies group coming in. You know, you have a design, but you can redesign your future if you don't like. It's like a negotiation. But I say, this is my thinking. And I agree, by the way, it's not my thinking originally, but it's my thinking now as an identity. Leander and Bolt claim that bodily movement, and these are their words, energy, passion, sensation, affect, is missing in text-centrism. Doesn't mean you do away with all text, right? We could never do that. Nobody can ever do away with these categories, these binaries. We need them, but we don't have to be stuck in one of them. We can be negotiating between them is the idea, I believe, that they're trying to get across. You can't be both. You know, when you identify with something, you're pretty much in that, and that's fine. But then when you learn, but other people are identifying this way, for me, that's exciting because it's like, these students taught me something. I don't think I did know who I was. And I'm not sure I'm this new identity either. But I'm in the phase of being really excited about what's happening to me intellectually, about this and where I'll go with it. And you're the first group I've shared it with. So again, it's not that I am saying this is the way to go. If you see me 6 months from now at LRA or whatever, I may say, I fell into some other difficulties. I'm going back to the one I feel safe in, which is the one I started out with. All right, and so I'm going to, there's just one more slide. Theories of positionality, put one's identity in a cultural freeze frame. I just love that quote. It comes from Masumi, and Masumi is a translator of Deleuze and Guattari, okay? It's not necessarily his work, but he attributes it to them. So you have to be careful about that. When translators start to write their own articles, and where they're getting their ideas from, okay? But it's not bad to read. Masumi 2000, and I can send you those references if you would like them. So, critique of text-centrism, and I'm working into now my question and answer period, and I apologize. I will go quickly through this in the sense that I think this is where I am, but it's not necessarily where you are. So, use of research and pedagogy as emergence and becoming. If you don't like that word emergence, use becoming. It means the same. Okay? It's like it's in the middle again. You aren't this kind of a person, you aren't that kind of person to be in the future. You're somewhere in this middle, in this beginning. You're emerging. But with no end point in mind. That's what bothers me a little bit. I'm rather, outcome driven. It's like, wait a minute, I think I do know what will happen if I go in that way or whatever. So I have to draw myself in and say, don't worry about it. Remember the angst I had that students didn't have in class? It was me having the angst about tests. They were fine with it. Pity the poor kids that come after them, right? They'll be fine with it too. Pretty soon we won't remember the days of their, what they call the old days, or the golden days, or back in the day. All right, so here's what a text-centrism looks like. As my image that I chose, it's not necessarily one that Kevin did not use this, did that, but it gets across what a middle is, and that is that there are no beginnings, no endings. And if you think of something like this, that everything is connected to everything else, and there are no actual beginnings or endings. Okay, only the middles count. You got the idea. I like better because I pull up crabgrass a lot in Georgia. If you ever pull up crabgrass, you'll know that when you think you've got it, and you've got the roots, you don't have it at all. You're in the middle of something that is growing back then and growing forward. And so you pick it up, tear it out, 2 weeks later, it's as if nothing had ever happened before. So this is not that. I tried to find a good picture of what I call crabgrass and how we pull it up, and I really couldn't. So this really up close identifies what we call a rhizome. I'm going to throw that word as the next slide depends upon it. A rhizome, it means having many connections that sometimes don't make any sense for beginning and ending, but they're only connected by something that is immediate in the middle. So that's another word for that would be a rhizome. In their talk, it's embodied activity because the boy is already doing these things with all the activities that he's showing in this one day of observation. And then it makes more sense when you read the article. So he's already doing this. He doesn't know anything about rhizomal activity or anything else, but he's experiencing it and demonstrating it, and he's not being studied. It was not a study of this kid. People tell me that it's her child, but she doesn't want to identify that. But people who know her say she's talking about her fifth grader, and she's not about to intervene and change his life to make him so that the teacher likes him. As a professor saying, I don't care if you struggle and read, I guess, and drop out of school. This is my outcomes coming in again, like, I don't know where I'm at this, but I love not knowing where I'm at. That's it. Questions, if you would put them, give them to Katie, who is going to collect them. And then I promise I will write an answer if you put your email address.
Here's what we could do, is if we collect the questions, then if you just do the answers, we'll send it out to everybody.
Okay. That is easier for me, yeah. So, Katie, thanks for collecting it. If they have questions, and again, if I say I don't know, you'll realize from having heard me speak today that I'm in the process also. I'm not saying I'm going to change my identity that quickly. I don't think you can. Although, as Don says in his 24-hour thing, what was yesterday, or what's today rather, I'm sorry, becomes, it's tomorrow right now, but tomorrow becomes today then, right, if that makes sense. I don't think people change their identities that fast, but I will tell you, I had dinner one time with Jim G, and he's a wonderful dinner person, if you don't mind me talk to as fast as I'm talking to you today. Only I get to talk. And Jim can beat me at talking quickly and making a lot of sense, etc. So he told me one time he doesn't believe in Poststructuralism and all these different subjectivities pushing back against things. And he said, actually, Donna, if you want to think about it, if we were all able to change and negotiate our identity so quickly, would we not be looking for some kind of medical care? So when I get off on these tangents, I always think, although you can write now, that's Jim. I probably, if I wrote him today, or if he saw the video or whatever, he would have some answer. I'm not sure what it would be. But I also know that he went through different identities. He's writing poetry and books now, went through that period. I gotta say, with neoliberalism and everything, and then now he's pulling back. He's retired, and he's living on a farm, and growing all sorts of plants and things like that, and now he has chickens as a Easter sort of time. And what slays me and my husband, because we know Jim and we like him, but he goes to classes once a week on how to raise chickens. So I think he is probably very tech-centric yet, in terms of there's a way to do it. If you don't do it, the chickens die. I don't know. So.
Donna, thank you so much. I think all of us in here are going to be facing these students that you faced, and I just appreciate so much that you were able to say, here is what I did, and it didn't go all that well. Here's what I learned from it. Because to me, that is the absolutely primary example of a reflective practitioner.